This isn't going to be an updates video, but I've just come across something very exciting as I'm setting up to film. Look at that little Anthurium warocqueanum leaf. How adorable is that? It is so, so tiny. Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well today. I'm about 1 minute into filming this video and already getting so distracted because I have just come across pests on a plant that I was thinking of doing stuff to today, and it's really bad. I honestly don't know how I haven't spotted this sooner. It's awful. It's really, really bad. So yeah, I will come back to that in a moment and I will take you through what's going on there. But today I just thought we could do some plant chores together. I've got lots of things that I've been meaning to do for a while. I also asked you guys to send in some questions, so I thought we could just do some planty stuff with a planty Q&A at the same time. But first, if you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learnt over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And yeah, I've got some repotting to do today, some moss poling, some potential pest treating now as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. So the plant that I've just spotted pests on is my dragon fruit cactus, and this is, I swear this is just sod's law because I only showed you guys this plant for the first time, I think last week or the week before, and it's thrips that I found on it, and I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see on camera. They're adult thrips, they're like the proper black ones, can you see? And as I say, I don't know how it's got this bad this quickly without me noticing it. I think because this has typically been quite a low maintenance plant for me, I think my pest checking just has not been where it should be. And just looking at this plant superficially, I think because there's like soil down there at the bottom and stuff, I've kind of just thought that maybe they're little bits of soil, but no, they're black adult thrips. And that probably means that everything in that area is probably going to have to be pest treated as well, which is so frustrating. I have found that jungle cacti are incredibly susceptible to thrips. And again, like I say, adult thrips. I don't think I've ever experienced like the young pale thrips with jungle cacti, but because they are much more robust, you almost don't expect to see thrips on them. And I think that's why, again, I just haven't noticed it, but I'm really annoyed. I'm really annoyed because I was looking forward to actually getting my hands on this plant today and dividing it and hopefully getting it to size up. But to start with, I'm gonna just take this one through to the bathroom so that it's well away from all of my other plants. My bathroom doesn't have any windows, so I don't have anything else in there. I'm gonna just take this one through and think about how I deal with it afterwards. Because yeah, it's not good. It's not good. Also just giving my potting mass a little wipe down. Not that I think there's anything on here, but better safe than sorry. So that was the plant that I was planning on starting with, but where shall I go instead? What shall I do instead? Okay, let's do this one. So this is my Anthurium doriaci, and this is the one that I got from Emma, I think about 4 or 5 months ago now. And I was growing this one on my coffee table in the middle of this room, and it was doing pretty well, but I had a space on one of my shelves by the window, and I was like, I'm just gonna see how it responds to a little bit higher light. And it's done super well for me. As you can see, all of its foliage has turned to face the light. I've been really bad at rotating this plant, but it has given me some beautiful new growth as well. Like this here is a fairly new leaf. And in fact, I think that's been a leaf that it's had while it's been in my care as well. So in my experience so far, it's probably one of my fastest growing anthuriums. And I think because structurally it's quite similar to like the clarinervium, for example, I didn't think it would be as fast as it has been to grow. So yeah, I'm excited that it's doing well for me, but I've currently just got it in a fine semi-hydro mix. And I have had luck growing quite a few anthuriums in semi-hydro, but I think, oops, I just spilled it. I think this mix is probably a little bit too fine for it. It's the Soil Ninja equivalent of Lechuza Pon. And I've been growing a lot of my anthuriums more recently in a chunky mix with tree fern fibre, and I have just been achieving some really amazing growth doing it that way. So I'm kind of in the process of transferring a lot of my anthuriums over to that instead. And yeah, that's what I'd like to do for this one today, ideally, and probably get it into a tower pot as well, just so that I can get some of the aerial roots at the top here submerged in the substrate and then allow them to grow down and root better into the medium. Oh my God, my words today. This is a very moany start to the video, but I also feel like I don't want to jinx it by saying it, but I think I might be getting ill. I'm very, very warm and I feel a bit blocked up, and often when I start getting ill, I don't know if anyone else gets this, my brain just, it's like, I don't know, it's like someone's put a spoon into my head and mixed it up, like everything is just, yeah, my words are just hard to find. So yeah, bear with me today. I kind of feel like gentle plant care is probably the best thing to be doing right now. So yeah, I'm going to start off by just taking it out of what it's currently in and having a look at the roots, which look really, really good actually. Yeah, wow, the roots look amazing. Yeah, look at those. They're super, super full, super healthy. And then in terms of a pot, as I say, I'd like to get it into a taller tower pot. And I've got a few here. And it might be okay with the smaller size. I thought it might need a bigger one, but I actually think that would work fine. I have got some of these big 15 centimetre ones as well, but I think, do I want to go bigger? Let's hold it in a big one as well, just to have a look. I know I was saying in a video recently about anthuriums quite liking being root bound, and that kind of sparked a conversation between you guys saying, actually, no, like you found that they grow much better when they're not root bound. And I've got to say, I have actually been putting some of my anthuriums in pots that I wouldn't usually put them in, that are a little bit bigger and do provide them a little bit more space. And I'm getting really good growth. Like I showed you the little Warocquianum leaf at the beginning of this video. My Veitchii got a new leaf. My Palladiflorum's putting out a new leaf, which is so exciting. And I've potted all of them in slightly bigger pots. So you guys are right. I'm gonna go slightly bigger, I think. I'm obviously gonna make a really nice, chunky, well-draining mix. So it's not like the roots are gonna be completely overwhelmed. But I feel like, yeah, a bigger pot is the correct way to go in this situation. Yeah, words are a struggle. But all of this stuff very much needs doing, and to be honest, I don't feel like ill. I just don't quite feel on form, top notch. But as I say, this is stuff I'd be doing off camera anyway, so I may as well go through it with you guys. And I'm also going to be better today, and I'm going to actually mix up my mix in a bowl. So this is just the Soil Ninja Anthurium blend. And I'm going to mix that with a little bit of tree fern fibre. And while I do this, as I say, I did ask you guys to send in some questions, so I'm just going to go through them in the order that you sent them in. And the first one is, what's been the easiest plant you've ever had? That I've ever had. So I think if you're able to provide good lighting conditions, in my experience, the bird of paradise is probably one of the easiest plants. It's definitely a plant that I've had it in my collection for a few years now. It's given me amazing growth and sized up really, really quickly in the time that I've had it. And I really just don't do much to it. And I mean, I say ridiculously high light. Actually, the spot that I've got my bird of paradise in now is at the lower end of high light. It is by my windows, but it doesn't get any direct sun or anything like that. and it seems really happy. I water it like once every 3 or 4 weeks. If it does dry out a little bit, then it's not going to complain. So yeah, I would personally say probably the bird of paradise. I've got others that have been very low maintenance, but I'm just thinking about plants that, ooh, something just fell on the other side of the room and made Yoli jump. But yeah, it's one that I honestly can't think of. In fact, actually, and this might make it an easy plant even more for this reason, if that makes sense, it has had spider mites. I got spider mites on my bird of paradise about 6 months ago now, I think. And I was like, oh my God, I was like, it's got such huge leaves. This is going to be a nightmare to treat. And I did one treatment and they've never come back. And it's quite rare, or at least for me, it's quite rare with spider mites, especially if an infestation is quite bad, and this was. It's quite rare that you can actually get them gone just through treating it once. Usually it's kind of a continuous thing and you have to do several treatments. But I think because the bird of paradise has just got such big waxy leaves, it's very easy to treat for pests. I just wiped over the leaves with horticultural soap. I got it in the shower, I spritzed it down, and that's literally all I did. So yeah, I think as an all-round easy plant, I would probably go with that one. What about you guys though? What's your easiest plant, if you had to say? And one of you said, I want to grow my Monstera dubia on a moss pole. Can I just pull it away from the plank? In fact, when I first got my Monstera dubia, initially I didn't put it on a moss pole. I would 100%, if I was going back and doing things differently now, I 100% would get it onto a moss pole sooner. But I just transferred it from one plank to another plank. This is back when I didn't know a lot about the plant as well. And I did just pull it away from its current plank and hope that it would reattach to the next one. But if you do that, I know that obviously sometimes it's unavoidable and you do need to do that. But in my experience, the aerial roots that have already attached to the original plank are not going to reattach to the new plank. So if you do remove it from the plank, the new growth is likely to root into the moss pole, but the existing aerial roots won't. And I know I transferred the big section of my Monstera dubia from a plank to a moss pole, and the way that I did this, and it is 100% the way that I would do it again if I was going to do it again, is I essentially made a section of moss pole to attach to the plank, and I just put it on top of the plank and it stayed, I think I kept it like that for about 3 months, and I just allowed the bit that grew onto the moss pole to root into that. I obviously kept the moss pole very hydrated, and then when I had a rooted section in the moss pole, I just made a chop and I chopped away that new bit and I got a whole new plant growing from there. So yeah, that's how I would recommend doing it. It's just because I know I've had a lot of success doing it that way. You could also try air layering some of the aerial roots before you do that. Just essentially packing some sphagnum moss around them on the plank, wrapping that in cling film, keeping it like that for maybe, I don't know, a month or two, obviously making sure that moss stays really, really hydrated. And that might just help to kind of activate some aerial roots to grow into the moss so that when you take it away from the plank, you're left with a little bit of root system. Yeah, that's personally what I would do. One of you said, my Scindapsus takes forever to root when I do it in water. Tips? So actually, to be honest, I don't tend to, you can do it in water, but I tend to use sphagnum moss for Scindapsus propagation. I've just found it to be the most effective and quickest way of doing it. So yeah, that's what I would recommend as my primary method of propagation. But if you can't get sphagnum moss, or if you just prefer not to do it that way, one really easy thing you can do is you can just take a pothos cutting and put that into the water with the Scindapsus. And it's really bizarre this, but basically Epipremnum, as it starts to root, gives off what is essentially a rooting hormone. So it helps other things in the same liquid to root faster. It's very, very clever. You can also get rooting hormone, like you can just buy rooting hormone and dip your cuttings in that. I've tried that in the past, and I've never had like miraculous things happen from doing it that way, but it is something you could try. Also, just in terms of skin adapted propagation in general, keeping your plants somewhere fairly light, fairly warm, fairly humid, those are all things that just help to speed up the propagation process. But yeah, as I say, if you're just wanting to increase speed, then I would personally recommend moss. Do you ever have a plant suddenly do something weird and you can't figure it out? Yeah, like all the time. All the time. Often, in fact, my Philodendron Splendid currently, I think it's probably just because I let its moss pole dry out and I shouldn't have done that, because most of its root system is currently in the moss pole. But that one has suddenly started going very brown and yellow on some of its leaves, and I'm going to have to give it a pretty major chop, I think. But I also think it's part of the fun of having plants. Like, as silly as that might sound, I quite enjoy the fact that my plants constantly keep me on my toes and they're constantly presenting challenges and obstacles to overcome. And although it might be a bit frustrating at the time, I tend to learn so much more from things going wrong. I mean, like, silly thing to say, but obviously that's how everybody learns. But yeah, I often feel like now I'm in a better position to give advice or my opinion on certain things because I know that things have gone really wrong with them in the past. And I also think that when you've got a lot of plants, it's also a good idea to be able to have a bit of a positive mentality about things like that, because things are going to go wrong. Like, I swear to God, even if you're an absolute expert and a botanist, there are still going to be times where things don't go in the way that you would predict, because plants are living things. They respond to even the smallest, sometimes, environmental changes. You can't keep stable conditions for a plant the entire time when you're growing houseplants in a home environment, unless you've got like a greenhouse with really specific settings. Yeah, I just don't think it's possible to keep things stable all the time. So stuff happens. Fabulous. So that one is all potted up and it's looking gorgeous in that new pot. And ideally, I would actually have liked to have potted it a little bit lower down, but it is quite like stemmy and it's meant that I can only get it so far in the pot. So what I'm probably going to do is pack some sphagnum moss around the top and then wrap something around it to just contain the moisture in the sphagnum moss so that the aerial roots, as I say, can activate. In fact, exactly like I've done for the little Warocqueanum here, you can see I've got moss inside there, and that's how I do it. That's how I have been doing it recently for my anthuriums, and things have been going a little bit better, because I know I say that Anthurium is a genus that I, as opposed to other ones, other types of plants, probably the one that I've struggled with the most. And I have actually, and I haven't spoken about this in any videos yet, but I've got a little, I don't know what you call it, like a secret anthurium collection. I've started building up a little collection of anthuriums that I haven't shown you guys yet. I haven't shown, the only person that's seen any of them is Emma. And I've decided to just keep them as my trial and error anthuriums. And it's not that I don't want to talk about them and I don't want to document things. I just can't, I don't know. Like, I put all of my collection online so much of the time. I quite like being able to have a few that I can be experimenting with off camera. So yeah, and I'm trying all sorts with them, so I will let you know when I've got some more updates on that. But yeah, that is just a growing thing that I found is working very well for them so far, so I will be doing it to this one. Oh, and I'm running out of space already. But what was the next thing on my list? Okay, while I am doing stuff with semi-hydro, so that I don't mix semi-hydro and soil too much, I think I'm gonna do my alocasia jack planer. And to be honest, I really need a bigger table. You might notice I've brought the table over here today. I thought that would work quite well. It's a horrible day outside. It's chucking it down with rain and the light is not amazing. So I was like, this will work better. Oh, but it just means that I have not got the most amount of space to be working with. But, so my alocasia Jacqueline is growing beautifully for me. I'm really, really happy with how she's doing. She's sizing up amazingly. But currently, I've just done like a little makeshift tower pot thing. I've just put some plastic around the top there. This is just like polycarbonate sheeting, and it's not secure. Like, she's wobbling about all over the place. So again, I want to ideally get this plant into a tower pot. And I think probably, yeah, I think one of these ones, the 15 centimetre ones, is going to be best. And I actually want to carry on growing this one in semi-hydro. I don't want to transfer this over to soil. I'm really happy with how this plant's doing in semi-hydro. And I'm wondering if I might be able to do a direct transfer of just literally picking it up and putting it in. But I'm not sure how easy that's going to be to do. Oh. In fact, okay, better idea. I'm going to take the polycarbonate sheeting off first. And I've just got some string here that I use to kind of hold the plant together because it's getting so big. Oh, and the good thing is, you can see, and this is why I like growing alocasia in a taller pot. If you look at the top just there, you can see all of those aerial roots just there have started to activate. And that is what I was aiming for. So let's try and do it this way. Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to completely break up the root system. I'm just trying to loosen it a little bit so that its roots can spread even better. And as you can see, I have actually got two plants here. These are two separate plants, so I could divide them. I mean, at some point, I think I'm probably going to have to, because this is going to get so big. But for the time being, I think I've got enough space to be able to grow them as one. One of you asked, do you have a wish list plant that you've never mentioned? I've got loads. As I've said before, I've got a massive list on my phone that is just filled with plants that I'd like at some point. One that I've never mentioned. I don't think I've mentioned the Philodendron Patriciae. I never know exactly how you pronounce it, but it looks quite similar. This is what happens to my brain. It looks quite similar to the Anthurium veitchii. I'll put a picture of it on the screen there so that you can see, but I just think it's stunning, and that is a philodendron that I would love to add to my collection at some point. And so the good thing is with this, what I've done here is there's actually quite a lot of space still at the top. I'm going to put a little bit more semi-hydro in, but it's going to mean that because I've got a gap there, I can just continue to fill this as the plant grows. And that should, in theory, mean that this plant is going to be absolutely fine in this pot for, knowing this plant, I want to say maybe like 6 months, another 6 months, 8 months, something like that. Yeah, I'm just going to put a little bit more semi-hydro on top just to keep it held and supported. Perfect. And then, in theory, I can just put it into the same pot it was in before. Fabulous. That was the easiest repot ever. But yeah, just look at the size of my Jacqueline now. She's growing so well, and I'm so proud of this plant. Yeah, just look at the size of some of her leaves now. They are getting crazy, crazy big. And this is a plant that I also struggled with pests with for quite a while. I've spoken about it before, but Alocasia as a genus can just be magnets for pests. I've got various types of Alocasia in my collection that I find are much more susceptible to pests than other types of plants. But the Jacqueline is a little bit of a nightmare when it gets pests, just because it's got very bristly leaves. They're almost like little hooks all over it. Someone before said they're almost like the texture of a cat's tongue, and I thought that was a really good way of describing it. But it just means that when the plant gets pests, actually getting into all the little nooks and crannies and crevices and actually being able to cover the full surface area of the plant with pest treatments can be a nightmare. So yeah, it's one that I check so much. Like, I check this plant not every single day, but like every few days I give it a really good look over, just because I don't want to have to deal with them again. It had mealybugs at one point, and oh my god, that was the worst thing to deal with. But I've got an exciting one. I've got a really, really, really exciting one that I've been looking forward to doing. So this is my Rhaphidophora foraminifera, and I got this one at the last London plant swap. And as you can see, it's not only given me that new leaf, which I know I have already shown you, but it's also starting to give me this one as well. And I would just like to get this one onto a moss pole so that it can just hopefully start to give me beautiful growth, and hopefully at some point start to fenestrate as well, because this is one that's capable of producing the most incredible fenestrations that are very much like, they're very close to the center of the plant and they just look beautiful. Again, I'll put a picture on the screen there if I can find one. But yeah, and this is one that I'm currently growing in semi-hydro, and I've had lots and lots of questions from you guys in the past about moss poles and semi-hydro. I want to continue to grow this one in semi-hydro, so I will attempt to show you how I do this, because I do use semi-hydro. I do use it with moss poles for quite a few of my plants actually, very successfully. I think the key is just to make sure that the moss and the semi-hydro aren't coming into contact that much, because obviously that can cause rotting. Yay, I'm so proud of this little one. So proud of it. It's got a very well established root system. It's good enough to be potted up, but it's still a little bit juvenile. Like, it's not huge, but it's grown insanely for me since I first got this plant. So I don't want to get it into a huge pot. In fact, I could, do I want to tower pot it? So the reason that I'm thinking not to tower pot this plant is just because, although I could do what I've just done with the Alocasia Jacqueline, and I could put it in and then I could keep filling the semi-hydro as it grows, that's not going to work along with the moss pole, because then I'd be filling semi-hydro over the moss, and that is not what we want to be doing. So I've got lots of transparent pots here, and I think maybe something like this is probably going to be the best shout for it. Yeah, I would say so. So this is a moss pole one I made earlier. This is one I actually used to use for my Philodendron verrucosum. And as you can see, I've left a gap at the bottom here, so the moss stops there. And I will stop filling my semi-hydro at the point where the moss starts, so they will never actually come into contact. So for example, yeah, there we go. If you see it in the pot, that is the point at which I'll fill it to. And if I did want to fill it higher, I'll just have to take some moss out of the bottom there. And yeah, that's how I always do it. It's really, really straightforward, really simple. I think, as with lots of plant things, it's very easy to overcomplicate things. It's very easy to think that there might be issues just because you're using two different substrates together, but actually, so long as they're not mixed, then chances are you're going to be fine. So I am going to do what I often do, is I'm going to take some leca and I'm going to just put that at the bottom just to stop. Oh, I just threw that all over myself. But just to stop as much of the semi-hydro falling through the bottom of the pot. Leca is just clay pebbles. I've spoken about it before. This is another question I think that I've actually written down here somewhere. Some of you are asking whether or not I do lots of pure leca growing. And I used to. I don't really know why I stopped, to be honest. I think I just found this semi-hydro mix that I use now, which is pumice, zeolites, lava rock, and something else. And I just got on better with that, and so I haven't really looked back. So yeah, nowadays I don't grow in purely leca that much at all, but I know a lot of people have a lot of luck doing it that way. As I say, there's nothing wrong with it at all. It's just not currently my preferred method of semi-hydroponic growing. I'm also aware that this moss pole, for what the size of this plant is going to be, this moss pole is not going to last that long. But even if it can just support the plants for, I don't know, a few months, and then I can either extend the moss pole or get it onto something more substantial, I'm happy with that. I just currently don't have anything else. And I'm again running very low on my plant supplies. I know I said at the beginning of each month I was going to try and place a little order and get everything neat and organised, and although I've been better at keeping things not neat but organised, there's a few things that I have fallen behind on. And to be honest, this weekend I was sitting looking at my plants and I was like, yes, again, I've let my plant care slip a little bit. And I know it just happens, you can't be on top of everything all the time, but I was feeling so on it a couple of weeks ago. And sometimes it feels like you can go from being ridiculously on top to all of a sudden behind schedule very, very quickly, because I've got some plants that don't need to be watered for a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, they suddenly look like they're doing awfully. So yeah, I need to just really go around and do a sweep of everything again, and once it's done, I'll be feeling much better about it all again. But yeah, cool. So that is what it's currently looking like. It's another one again. I know I said I wasn't going to add, or I was going to try not to add too many moss pole climbing plants to my collection because they take up so much space. This now won't fit on the shelf that it was on, so I need to think about where I'm going to put it. But yeah, I will also put it inside a ceramic pot or in a dish or something like that so that I can create a little water reservoir at the bottom. But yeah, I'm very excited to see what it does for me next. Oh, my camera battery just died. But the next thing, I know I should absolutely be cleaning up more as I go, but I'm just instead sweeping everything to one side, and I will deal with it shortly. The next thing that I wanted to look at is one that's just really not doing very well, and there's many reasons why this one isn't doing well. This is one of my spider plants, and to be honest, I've got quite a few spider plants in my collection. I really struggle. I know that they give off babies like no tomorrow, and I do take them to plant swaps. I do give them to neighbours. You can't keep all of them, can you? And I think this one has just become very, very neglected because I've just got too many of them to keep on top of. But I am, however, going to try and save it. I do think I will probably be taking this one to a plant swap this year. In fact, one of the questions that is on the list somewhere is one of you saying, which plant swaps am I going to? And so it's another plant swap that I go to. And I, this year, am going to both the London ones, the Bristol one, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, I think, which is very exciting. And I think, what were the other ones? I don't think I can do the Manchester one. I think I'm also going to be potentially going to the Plymouth one as well. So yeah, that is currently my plant swap agenda. And it would be lovely to see some of you there as well. I'm not sure entirely what I'm going to take, to be honest, yet. I have toyed with the idea of chopping up my large form Monstera dubia, which would be very scary. But yeah, apart from that, honestly, I have no clue. No clue. But this spider plant, so I think the reason that it's looking like this is neglect. I have underwatered it so much that I think it is just starting to show the signs of, yeah, dying. It has got the most ridiculous root system on it. Just look at those roots coming out the bottom of the pot. So yeah, it's no surprise that it gobbles water like no tomorrow. So I water this one, and then if I don't get around to watering it again for another week or two, it suffers. So I think what I'm going to do, firstly, I know I was saying about pushing stuff to one side, I am just going to get the semi-hydro here that I've emptied into a bowl so that then I can reuse it. I'll boil it up and sterilise it, and then I can reuse it for other plants, and then it won't mix with the soil I'm about to empty out. But the next question made me laugh. Someone said, how's the rug? And if you've been watching my videos since the beginning of the year, you will know that my lovely rug that used to be in this room here, me and Ross decided to clean it. We decided to do a deep clean of it over Christmas, and it took us a very long time to wash because it's a very big rug, and we put it outside on the balcony to hang up, and it's been out on the balcony since, and it's still on the balcony. It's still on the balcony, and like I feel bad about this, but it is now past the point of no return. Like, the rug is growing another rug, and it needs to just go in the bin. I don't know why, like, I should have just taken it to a dry cleaner sooner. I absolutely should have done. It wasn't an expensive rug, and I know that's not the point, but yeah, it's one of these things. It's been a chore that I haven't wanted to do. I've put off. I've been looking at every single day and feeling bad about, so I just haven't done anything about it. So yeah, the rug is still there. Hopefully at some point it will move off the balcony. I need to just deal with it. But yeah, the rug's good. The rug's good. Or not so good. Cool. Depending on, I was going to say, actually, I could get this spider plant into semi-hydro, and then I could keep it in this plastic bag, and that could be its reservoir. I've done that with a few of my plants, actually, a few of my hanging ones in semi-hydro. I've just done that to create a reservoir. But let's have a look at it. I know it is very dry. I feel like some root pruning may be in order as well. Oops, I've also just pulled off a big leaf. How often do you get plant burnout? Whoa, my God. I don't know if you can see how crazy those roots are. I've spoken a lot about plant burnout on my channel. I get it quite a lot, and not because I don't love plant care, but I think I'm definitely the sort of person, like, I get very obsessive over things, and I like, obviously plants are one of the things that I do really obsess over, and when I'm on top, I absolutely love it. But sometimes, like I literally just said, it can feel like you can go from being on top to being behind, like, overnight. And that is when I often really struggle. I'll go from looking at my plants and being like, oh, everything looks so lovely, to suddenly being like, oh my God, I've got so much to do, and that stresses me out. It's like me looking at the rug and going, nope, it's too much and I don't want to look at it. That can absolutely happen to me with plant care as well. So although this year so far, we're in February now, mid-February, this year so far, I think plant care has been, in general, lovely, and I've loved it. There have still absolutely been moments within there of burnout. Also, I've just found what looks to be one of those little, like, mesh plug things that go around the roots. Yeah, this was obviously a plug plant. And that's weird, because I thought this was one of my baby propagations. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe this was a mother plant. I don't know. But yeah, again, like I've said a million times, I think the key is when you've got plant burnout to not beat yourself up about it. I know that's such an easy thing to say, but it always feels worse when you're also kind of on the attack at yourself. Like if I have days where I'm like, oh my God, there's so much stuff that needs doing and I feel like I really need to be doing it, and then I start getting annoyed at myself for that, then it doesn't make anything better. And realistically, like with plant burnout, if your plants might be looking awful, but like another day or two is not going to make a huge amount of difference. It's just not. So often if I'm not feeling it, I'll just say to myself, right, okay, go away, come back tomorrow, come back in a couple of days time and deal with it then. Unless it's like, I don't know, unless it's like, for example, the plant with thrips that I saw earlier, if that one was touching another plant, I'd say probably just move it away. But a lot of things, oh my God, also, as I'm doing this, I'm breaking off like all the leaves. Should I just let this plant go? Oh, I'm so bad at this, I don't think I can. Okay, this is just going to be a very big reset for this plant. But yeah, I think being able to do the bare minimum some days is fine. It's absolutely fine. And just remember as well that like you're not alone with plant burnout. I think in, as I have said again before, but in like the social media world that we live in, where everyone's putting beautiful photos of their plants online all the time, it's very easy to let yourself believe that everyone else is on top and you're not. And I feel like that as well. I find it really bizarre that I'm even considered like an influencer in the plant world, because I literally a lot of the time will spend my time on social media going, oh my God, this person's plants look amazing, that person's plants look amazing. I look at like when some of you guys send me pictures, I'll look at your pages and I'll be like, oh my God, your plants are so much better than mine, and you're obviously like, you've got your shishmataglottis together so much more than I have. It's so easy to do that comparing thing, and we just should not be doing it, because yeah, we all have the highs and the lows, don't we? Also, these roots are really weird. They kind of go from thin to thick. You see, it's almost like, I don't know, it's like an octopus. So I'm going to give some of these roots a little prune back, just because I've now got a very small plant here and it does not need such a hefty root system. And I think, actually, I have a feeling this spider plant is one that my neighbours left me when they moved out. I think that's where I got it from. Because, yeah, also, this isn't one of my own soil mixes. This just looks like a very kind of, like, dense, not particularly good quality mix that you typically get from garden centres. So I'm thinking maybe it was one of the plants they gave me. Okay, cool. So that is what I'm working with. That's all I think the plant needs. And as I've said before, actually doing a little bit of root pruning from time to time can just be a really good way to stimulate growth in your plants. So hopefully that will just help this one kick back into action a little bit. Because I absolutely love spider plants. I know they get such a bad rap a lot of the time. But I just think they're lovely plants. I really, really enjoy growing them. Perfect. And I've got just a Soil Ninja base mix here with a bit of bark mixed through, and I'm just going to pot it straight in that. There we go. That already is looking so much better. So much better. And I can see some new little growth points coming up at the bottom there as well. So yeah, I'm going to give those ones a water through now. Have a little bit of a clean up on the table here because I have made a mess. And then I was going to say maybe pest treat that other plant. I've got some more stuff here that I wanted to do, but I might just go and pest treat the other one first. Yeah, I feel like this feels like a good breaking point. Time to have a clear up and to do some pest treating, which I cannot be bothered to do. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, hello Yuli, what I'm gonna do for the plant that needs pest treating, I've got it through in the bathroom at the moment, and Ross is actually on a call, so I'm not gonna be able to talk through everything I'm doing through there. But annoyingly, it's not ready for a drink yet, so I can't really, what am I saying? Like, ideally, I wouldn't be getting its soil ridiculously wet because I don't want it to develop root rot. So what I think I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just give it a really, really good shower down, and then I'm gonna bring it back through here. I'm gonna get rid of as many like visible pests as I possibly can in the bathroom. And then I'm gonna bring it over to a spot in my kitchen far away from my other plants, and I'm gonna kind of do what I was planning on doing initially today. I'm gonna divide the plant, and I'm gonna just go through and like give it a rinse with horticultural soap and do that as I go. And yeah, that way I can change it out for completely fresh soil. And then, to be honest, probably just keep it inside a plastic bag or something like that to keep it isolated. But that feels like the right thing to do because, as I say, like it's going to be impossible to get into all the little nooks and crannies accurately without dividing the plants because it's literally pushing out of that pot. So yeah, that's my plan of action. So I'm gonna go give it a really good wash off, get rid of any pests that I can see, and then bring it back through and we can do more treatment. I'm trying to detangle the roots, and actually they're just lifting away like that in little sections. So although this is going to take a bit of time, I think while I'm here I may as well just try and get as many removed as I can, because then I'm going to be able to just dunk them and pest treat them, and I think that's going to make my life much easier. Okay, I know I said I was going to set up in the kitchen, but to be honest, the kitchen has become so planty that I think it's easier if I just do it here where I'm already set up. And I have given these sections, they're in a Tesco bag, in case you're wondering what the bag is. I've just given them a really good blast off in the shower. But what I've done is I've got each individual little bit like that, and I'm going to give them all a rinse off in just normal water here, just to get the rest of any soil or anything that's there off. And then I've got some horticultural soap mixed up just here, so that then I can dunk them if they need it, give them a wipe over. It's going to take quite a lot of time, but this means I can get through lots of questions in the Q&A. So this is also far more fun than it would be for me doing this off camera. So yeah, I encourage you, if you've got pest treating or coffee machine, pest treating or something planty that you've been putting off or something that you don't particularly want to do, please grab it and do it with me, and we can do it together. Oh, the other thing I should get is something to put the pieces on afterwards. Gotta get an old towel or something. Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna use an old tea towel for this. But the next question, how do you get so many of your plants to grow so big, like leaves so big? So I have spoken about this in detail before, but for me, I think like the plants that I feel really, really proud of, and ones that I think some people would be quite surprised I've been able to achieve the level of growth that I have in a UK home environment, are ones such as my Monstera dubia, my large form Monstera dubia. And again, I've made specific like breakdowns and care videos on this, but the primary thing that I think has really, really helped for me is light. And I've said this a million times and I will continue to bang on about it, but so much of the time people will think that just because a plant can survive in lower lighting conditions, it means that the plant's going to thrive. And that's absolutely not the case. I've got lots of plants in my collection that I've had for years and years and years. Some of them have been incredibly adaptable. Some of them have lived in very low lighting conditions with me. And it's amazing that they've been able to survive that. But it has meant that there have been points where I haven't been able to bring out the best potential in those plants. So yeah, and I would also say, although houseplants on the whole tend to be much more adaptable than we give them credit for, a lot of them are naturally already living in much lower lighting conditions than they would be receiving in their natural habitats, just because most of us can't replicate tropical conditions in our own homes. I'm assuming a lot of us live in places like me in the UK with not a lot of sunshine. But yeah, just because something might be considered highlight for you, it doesn't mean it's necessarily considered highlight for that plant, if that makes sense. So yeah, but with the Monstera dubia, I heard for a really long time that that was a plant that could survive in lower lighting conditions, and I'd seen lots of people growing it in, like, when I say lower lighting, I'm kind of like medium lighting conditions, not direct sun or anything like that. And yeah, I was living at my mum's house at the time, and I was growing that plant in her conservatory, and I slowly acclimated it to be able to take full sun. And that's when I really kind of started to notice the magic happen. I really started to notice that plant size up. It was giving me these beautiful fenestrations, and I can absolutely guarantee that if I'd done that on day one when I first got the plant, it wouldn't have worked like that. The plant probably would have just burnt. But as I say, I did it as a gradual acclimation. And now my Monstera dubia, in fact, I'll spin you around so you can see. Oh, there's Yoli. Assuming you can see it just there, I think you should be able to. Yeah, it's now growing right in my window. And as you can see, it doesn't even look like what you would consider a Monstera dubia to look like nowadays, because it's not shingling anymore. Can you see what I'm doing? Not that it's particularly exciting. But yeah, so that for me, I think light is the most important thing. The most important thing. And people can tell you all these other tips and tricks and all these things, but I think primarily lighting is the most important. I mean, like, you look at people like, for example, Sydney Plant Guy, who, if you guys don't know him, he's also on YouTube and he's absolutely fantastic. But he lives in Australia and he gets very high levels of light. And you look at the size and scale of his plants and they are just incredible. And I'm not saying that is unachievable in a UK home environment, but I think you've got to put a lot more measures in place if you want to be able to achieve growth like that, just purely for the fact that we don't get that amount of sunlight. So yeah, also I think on that note, it's very important to not, kind of like what I said earlier, but not beat yourself up if you feel like you're not growing plants to that level, like that there's something wrong with what you're doing, because we as plant parents play our role in making sure that the plants stay happy, but a lot of it does come down to the conditions they're being provided with. Also, I know I've been trying to do things very much chemical free, but because this is one of my rescue plants. I got this at a garden centre last year, and I've only just got it to a state of being healthy, and I cannot believe I didn't notice the thrips. But if in a few weeks' time I'm still struggling, I might go in with a systemic pest treatment, at least on some of the sections, because I'm going to be left with a few plants after this. Yeah, just to be on the safe side, because I really don't want this plant to be taken down, and I don't want to have to be doing this again, because this is a properly finicky pest treatment. The good news is it's got a pretty healthy root system. Like, I don't really know what I was expecting it to look like, but considering this plant was very rotten when I first got it, I wasn't expecting it to be this good. Have you bought new plants this year? Yes, I have. I've spoken about it in videos already. I haven't bought any new plants this month. If that's, I mean, that condenses all of my plant buying to January. And I did have a little splurge in January. I got myself my Palladiflorum, which was a wish list plant. And in fact, I say I had a splurge in January. Everything else that I did was through swapping. I did some swaps with you guys. Yeah, everything else was either very kindly gifted to me or swapped for. So, I think, was that right? Oh no, that's also a lie. I also bought myself another secret anthurium. But yeah, I haven't been awful this year. But I think we've kind of, me and Ross have established that if I want to buy more plants this year, especially now there's 2 of us living here, it's gonna have to be fairly small plants or cuttings, just because I think we're doing pretty well considering there's us, 300 plants, Yoli of course, and we are in a 1-bedroom flat. I think we're doing pretty well. But considering my plants do grow and we are just coming into growing season, I think small plants and cuttings. Small plants and cuttings only, and then we can reevaluate at some point when me and Ross have got a bigger space. Tips for getting seeds to germinate faster. My anthurium seeds are taking forever. So I actually did a little experiment on this a while ago, and I did make a video on it. I will link that video down below actually, because I can't remember exactly what it was called. But I pollinated one of my anthurium clarinerviums, and I tracked the process of that. And then when it came time to potting them up, I tried them in lots of different ways to see if there was any way to essentially speed up the germination process. And it was really interesting actually. I had some really interesting results from trying different things out. And for me, the most effective way to get anthurium seeds to germinate, and the fastest way, is by using sphagnum moss and essentially creating like a little propagation box, like covering a sealed tub and germinating them in the dark. And I think, and from the digging that I've done since doing that experiment, I think this is literally just because it essentially replicates the natural conditions of seeds. Like, they're going to fall, they're going to be buried in the ground, and they're going to have to find their way to the light. So yeah, it just helps them, in my experience, to root a little bit quicker and just get things going. And actually, the anthurium babies, because I've now got lots of little baby anthurium clarinerviums, and those ones, the ones that I germinated in the dark, most of them started to give me foliage quicker, and a lot of them have kind of sized up a lot quicker. So yeah, I would 100% recommend doing things this way. There's probably more experimenting I could be doing, but because I don't have anthurium seeds that often, it is a very long process to germinate them. I haven't been able to do maybe as much experimenting as I would like to, and as I hope to do in the future. But yeah, currently that is what I have found out. But if any of you guys have a better way of doing things, please comment it down below, because I'm always interested to know, and it's very useful for other people as well. So yeah, let me know. Do you ever use a moisture meter? Sometimes. Sometimes is the short answer. I used to use a moisture meter all the time when I first started getting into houseplants. That is just how I did things. I was very used to doing things that way. And then as I started to get to know my plants a little bit better and become probably a little bit more complacent, I stopped using my moisture meter and I just started using my finger. And typically that is how I do monitor most of my plants. I just stick my finger down into the soil and feel. But for some of my plants, and in fact, I know I mentioned earlier in the video about my secret anthurium collection. I've been trying a few different things with them, and actually some of the substrates that I'm experimenting with, especially ones that are very barky, it's quite hard to tell sometimes just from sticking your finger down. So I have started using a moisture meter again for some of those, just to help me figure out exactly what those plants like, just until I can get my head around like feeling it for myself and knowing. So yeah, I don't use a moisture meter for the majority of my plants, but I do have some that I do. One of you asked, how are Yoli and Ross? What have you all been up to? Yeah, Yoli and Ross are good. Yoli is flat out asleep. Hello, baby. She's asleep on the sofa at the moment. I need to take her out shortly because she's been very good. She hasn't had a walk yet today. She's just opened her eyes. I'm sure she knows what I'm saying. But no, Yoli's really good. We had a lovely weekend, actually. We last weekend we went to some friends to watch the rugby, some of Ross's friends, and they've got dogs that Yoli gets on really well with. And oh my goodness, because she's a rescue and because there's a lot of dogs that she doesn't get on well with, it's really lovely when she has little friends to play with. So they were bolting about. We went to an enclosed space and took them there so they could run. And Yoli didn't have to wear her muzzle, because out and about I do tend to put a muzzle on her just because she can be a little bit unpredictable. So yeah, she was able to play with her ball and play with them, and it was just really nice. And yeah, she's good otherwise, I think. She seems very happy. And yeah, Ross is also good. He's currently in a meeting next door at the moment. Things are good. We've been living together for a few months now, and honestly, I'm absolutely loving it. We live very well together, which is nice. We actually did a repot and chat over on my Patreon, which went up about 3 days ago at the time of filming this. Cool. No. So what you do, if you just really kind of tease the roots a little bit.
Yeah, Mum's the sissy.
And at some point I will 100% do a repot and chat with Ross over here on YouTube, but we put a viewer discretion thing on the one on Patreon just because Ross's sense of humour is, let's just say, a little bit more adult, and I know that there's people of all ages that watch my videos over here on YouTube. But yeah, that was good fun. We had a laugh doing that. What else have we been up to? To be honest, we haven't, I don't think we've done anything, unless I'm being very, very forgetful. I don't think we've done anything major recently. We've been having lots of crafty weekends, which I love. Ross is also really into arts and crafts, and I mean he is an amazing artist. He does lots of drawing and sketching and clay building, which to be honest I can't pick up and show you because I've got wet hands, but I don't know if you can see the busts behind me. He's been making lots of things out of clay. So yeah, oh my god, we were saying the other day, we were are we really sad? Or are we just getting older? I don't know, but as I get older, and probably as I'm just a little bit more supportive of who I really am, embracing my true self, I much prefer staying at home doing quiet things, doing arty things, doing planty things, than I do going out and socialising all the time. And I know I've said this before, as I've got older, I am 100% more of a home bird than I used to be. But those quiet days at home, for me, there is nothing like them. I recharge from those days. So yeah, we've just been putting time aside to draw, to play games. Younger Claire would be rolling her eyes and thinking I sounded very sad by saying that, but honestly, I love those days more than anything. So yeah, that is what we've been up to. We've been doing a lot of that, and it's been really lovely. My alocasia always has spider mites. I treat it and then they're back. Help. I relate to this a lot, because if you have been on my channel for a while, you'll know about my alocasia portadora, which I'll put a picture on the screen. It's the one, my big alocasia, probably the oldest plant in my collection. And I've said a few times that I am on my final try with this plant because it is just a magnet for pests. And there's certain types, for me it's alocasia as well actually, but I was going to say there's certain types of plants that are just much more susceptible to them. And I've said loads of times before, it obviously a lot of the time comes down to the overall health of your plant. Unhealthy plants are always much more likely to get pests. They're much more susceptible to disease, to root rot, to all sorts of things. Hence why focusing on health instead of always just fast growth in your plants is the most important thing. But for example, with my alocasia portadora, I feel like I'm doing all the right things and I am still very much struggling with that plant. I have it growing in ideal conditions. It's in a really good, healthy substrate. It's surrounded by lots of other alocasias that have not got pests. So basically what I'm saying is I feel your pain. And I'm sorry I don't have a definitive answer for you. Apart from just make sure you're keeping your plant as healthy as you possibly can be and checking it regularly. I've got some alocasia that I can go weeks and weeks and weeks without checking and I just kind of know that they'll be fine. Whereas my Alocasia portadora, similarly to what I was saying about my Alocasia Jacqueline earlier, I check it every couple of days and I quite commonly find pests on it. Like since I did the repot on it, which was only a few weeks ago, I've already seen thrips on it and I've already had spider mites on it. And it is one of these plants that I've just kind of had to accept the fact that I will probably always have something going on with it just because it seems to draw pests to it. So yeah, like if you're like me and if it's becoming too much, I would say get rid of the plant, pass it on to someone else who's willing to give it the time of day, and get something else that ticks the same box but doesn't come with the aggro. Because yeah, like I don't want to do that with my Alocasia portadora. I really don't, because I love the plant. But it's getting to the point where I'm thinking I probably will pass it along to another home, just purely because it is so much, it's taking up so much of my energy to keep the plant healthy. So yeah, that's probably not the answer you were looking for, but that is what I would personally say. One of you said, my pink princess's variegation, pink princess's variegation is very dull and not bright pink. Can I do anything to help this? So again, one of the main things you can do is increase its light. There are, like, I remember when, in fact, I've still got my pink princess, but it's a plant that I'm kind of getting ready to part with, to be honest, because I'm not loving it that much and I haven't been for a while. But when I was growing mine, again, in my mum's conservatory, and when it was at its optimum health, that's when its variegation looked the most dramatic and vibrant. And again, as I say, that came down to it receiving long hours of light and bright light throughout the entire day. And even then, sometimes as a leaf was unfurling, the variegation would look really, really bright and gorgeous. And then as the leaf matured and hardened off, then it would fade slightly. And to be honest, I think that just happens. I don't think there's much you could do to preserve that. But yeah, also obviously making sure that you're, again, like just all-round conditions, making sure your plant is happy, making sure it's got all the right nutrients as well, because if it's nutrient deprived, then it's just in general not going to look as lovely and vibrant. So yeah, assuming your plant's putting out growth, making sure you're fertilizing it, making sure you're not over-fertilizing it. And yeah, again, light. I would say light is the most important thing with this plant. I really am just, yeah, I've been really hoping that I would fall back in love with my pink princess, and it's just not happening. I think, again, if I had more space to be able to kind of bring out the potential in that plant a little bit better, maybe I'd be feeling differently. But since living here, I just haven't been able to do that. And for that reason, it's just felt like a bit of a chore caring for it. So yeah, I could chop it up and I could take it to plant swaps because it's so big. And I'd be interested to know what you guys think about this actually. Because it's so big, I kind of feel like if I was going to sell it, I would get more money. And I know this isn't all about the money, but it would be nice to be able to put some back into my plant fund and like buy myself a new plant with it or something. But I think I'd probably get more money selling it as a full plant as opposed to if I was to do it as individual cuttings. I don't know. But then equally as well, and I have said this before, if it came down to the money or knowing that it was just going to go to a really good home, I do think I would pick sending it to a really good home, because I know how happy at one point that plant made me. I would love to think it was making someone else as happy. So yeah, I'm very undecided, as you can tell, but it is on the cards. And I'm just going to stop for a moment and change the camera battery because I can tell my camera is about to die. So bear with. Fabulous. I really wish that this camera would record for longer than half an hour. Usually at around the half an hour mark, it just cuts me off. And then I always lose my train of thought. It doesn't take much for me to lose my train of thought. But I think I'd answered that question. The next one is, did the peperomia hope propagate? And I assume you mean the one that I did fairly recently. And I'm trying to think how long ago I actually got that started. I think it was only a couple of weeks ago. And I must confess, I haven't actually checked back on it in the last like week or so. So to my knowledge, so far, it hasn't done anything more. But I'm definitely going to make an updates video in the next few days probably. I've got so many exciting things happening in my collection at the moment and things that I'm really, really excited to take you through. So I will do a little update on the Peperomia Hope in that video. And I really hope doing it this way with the half leaf cuttings in a little prop box, I really hope that works. Hope. But actually, it's despite being not the fastest growing plant in the entire world, since I chopped those sections away from the mother plant, almost all of the nodes have started putting out new bits of growth. So it is growing back, and I'm hoping that now I've upped its light, I'll be able to get it looking a little less straggly. I'm thinking as well it could have been down to inconsistent watering, because I think I have just been letting that one dry out a little bit too much. I know it is a very succulent plant and it does like to dry out slightly between waterings, but I have been letting it go like bone dry for ages. So I think I just need to stay a little bit more on top of that one. Oh, we're getting there. There's actually more of this plant than I thought there was. Now that it's all spread out like this, it feels like there's loads of it. I think I'll probably be able to get quite a few plants out of this. And I do hope that this is the only pest treatment I'll have to do. I mean, because this plant is quite like, I don't know how, like waxy. I don't know how you explain the texture of it. Because, I mean, it's jungle cacti, because it's quite like robust and like waxy smooth, I feel like it might not be as easy for eggs and like hidden pests to lodge themselves as they would do with some other types of plants. Does that make sense? But as I say, if I do need to go in with chemicals just to ensure they don't come back, then I will. This is an interesting question and not plant related, but someone asked, do you get scared putting yourself online? So when I first started doing YouTube, 100% I was terrified to put my first video out, and I watch it back now and like I feel like I just look so scared in it. Maybe I would notice it more so than other people, but like I was so scared. I was so scared. And nowadays, I don't think, no, not really. I think it's a weird thing having yourself out there on, I guess, like any form of social media, but with YouTube in the way that I kind of do a lot of very informal kind of chatty stuff. The one thing that I found with it is that although I think the plant community, as I always bang on about, is so utterly, utterly wonderful, and it's filled with amazing people, and I've made some really phenomenal, some really amazing friends through doing what I do. I think it's very easy for people to feel like they know you very well, and therefore sometimes they can kind of like tell you what to do. I'm very lucky in the sense of I don't get a huge amount of like hate comments on my channel. I get the odd one or two here or there, but like nothing awful. Like I don't think I've ever had anything terrible. But what I have had a few times throughout doing YouTube is like people telling me what they think I should be talking about, things that aren't plant related, for example, like things that I should be covering, and kind of dictating the way that I do things on my channel, which like I personally don't think is the right thing to do with anyone at any time, but I can understand maybe if they feel like they know you, then they have the right to tell you what to do a bit more. As I say, I still don't think it's a thing, but that is the only, that's not like a scared putting yourself online, but that is something that I've experienced that has been a little bit more unpleasant, let's say, in my time of being like more publicly online doing what I do. And for that reason, on the whole, it's why I try to keep everything that I do very focused. And although occasionally I'll speak a bit about like personal stuff, and I'll talk about like Yoli and me and Ross and stuff like that, it's always primarily about the plants, and I do very much try and keep it that way. But yeah, I think like the sad thing is, in the world we live in today, when people think that they have a right to say absolutely anything, and like, yes, although everybody is entitled to their opinion, sometimes I think you should just be able to keep your opinion to yourself if it's going to hurt other people. You know, if it's at someone else's expense, sometimes I'm like, what was the purpose of you saying that? I know when, and this gave us a good giggle, when I first posted about, when I said that Ross was moving in, someone said, oh, well, I hope this doesn't mean we're going to be subjected to Ross all the time. And whilst I completely understand and appreciate that you're here for plants and the way that I do plant stuff, I'm just like, was that necessary? Was it necessary to say that? And in fact, I've had various kind of little things here or there over the years, but a few months ago, I had somebody comment basically saying like, I really don't feel like you're being authentic online. I feel like I don't, something along the lines of, I just don't believe your personality or something. And although I tried to just kind of think, okay, well, like, wasn't necessary for them to say or whatever, it did make me go, oh, ow, like that was very, very personal. And I think the thing with that as well is that sometimes, especially when you're doing something like this as a job, there's going to be times where you're not always 100% on form. You're not always going to be on the ball. You're not always going to be the best version of yourself. There's going to be days where, there's days where I watch some things back as I edit them. In fact, potentially even today with this video, because I said I'm not feeling 100% today, but sometimes I will watch stuff back and I'll go, oh, like that, like I should have said something better there, or I should have done something better, or I wish I'd responded differently to that or something. And I like that for me was a bit like, oh, ouch. But then again, like, if people feel the need to call stuff like that, then that is their choice. Like, I do have a public YouTube channel. I am putting stuff out publicly. So although it's not nice to always receive negativity around things, as I say, it doesn't happen that often. And I don't think you can ever avoid it. You can't please everyone, can you? And I know my mum would always say that to me when I was growing up. But the older I get, I'm like, you know what? It is so true. You can do everything right, and there's always going to be some people that just don't like it. And that is just life. That's just how it goes. There's nothing any of us can do about that. So yeah, just kind of got to get on with it. One of you said, I noticed your marble queen has a bit without leaves. Mine had the same. What causes this, please? Yeah, so in fact, I don't know if I can tilt the camera up so you can see. It's the one running up there, just there. You can see there's a big stretch there that doesn't have any leaves on the vine. And that, to be honest, I don't know the exact reason that happened. Oh, sorry, can't multitask. I don't know the exact reason that happened to mine, but I suspect it came down to irregular watering. Because it's a pothos and I can get so lazy because I know it's a plant that can basically take a lot of neglect. I'm really, really bad when it comes to watering it sometimes. And I'm trying to think when the leaf loss actually happened. I have a feeling it might have been around Christmas time, which would make sense because so many of my plants dried out so much. And I went back and I watered them. I think because that one had got so dry, when I watered it through, there was probably some rotting that happened around the roots. I did look at the roots, and to be honest, I couldn't see anything, but sometimes it can just also throw your plant into a state of shock. So I believe that to be the reason why it's happened to mine. I will hold my hands up and say, I know I did not deal with that issue effectively, but since then the plant has been putting out loads of beautiful growth. I haven't had any more leaf loss, so I'm not worried about it anymore. It seems to have just kind of resolved itself. But if this was happening to someone else's plant, or like if I'm giving you advice on what to do with your plant, I would 100% say, get it out of its pot, check the roots. If anything at all looks bad, if it looks rotten, if it looks sludgy, trim those roots back. If you need to treat the whole plant for root rot, then absolutely do. change out its soil, and then just monitor it very closely. But as I say, if anything had been going, if stuff was still going wrong with mine now, or if it had lost more leaves, then I would have been more vigilant. I can be really bad sometimes. Like, I feel like, I don't know, it's very easy, isn't it, when some plants are, like, it's always the easy plants that get the brunt of this, because you know they can just take a bit of, I was going to say bashing, that's not the right word. Yeah, neglect. You can just, they'll typically bounce back. They'll typically find a way to save themselves. And that is not what I want to be promoting on my channel. So I need to give myself a slap on the wrist and get better with stuff like that. The good thing actually about dividing this plant and doing what I'm doing now is I'm actually able to remove a few little bits like this that I can see have started to rot. And I know I mentioned before that this plant was a rescue plant from a garden centre, and this is what it looked like pretty much all over when I first got it. So yeah, it's done really, really well for me, and it's heartbreaking really to see, I mean, it could be worse. I was going to say to see it covered in thrips, but I think I've caught it soon enough, and I think it should be fine. Someone asked, how many anthuriums do you own? If you count like actual anthuriums, probably hundreds, because I've got loads of Anthurium clarinervium babies. If we're just talking about how many different species of Anthurium do I have, I've got 1, 2, 6. I think I've got 15 or 16. I might be missing some, but I think I've got, let's say 16. I always get mould on top of the soil on my houseplants. How do you stop this from happening? There's a few different ways you can stop this from happening, but commonly mould builds up when, I mean, mould typically forms in very damp conditions. So the times that I've had mould on top of houseplant soil before, it's typically been with a plant such as a calathea, for example, one that likes its soil to remain fairly consistently moist. The first thing I would do is probably cut back on your watering a little bit. I've got a calathea that I can see just next to me here. In fact, that one has its soil very consistently moist. It's not in the biggest area of airflow in my home, and just like I never let its soil become wet. Like, the soil is never wet. I wait for the top layer of soil to dry out, and then I will go ahead and water it again. And by doing it that way, I don't have to deal with mould anymore. But I know back in the day when I was watering a little bit more intensely, that's when I noticed it. As I just touched on as well, airflow with your plants is something that 100% can lead, or bad airflow, sorry, should I say, can lead to mould build-up. And in order to prevent this, just make sure you're opening your windows regularly. You can use a fan and stuff like that. I mean, to be honest, if a space has a lot of movement in it, sometimes that is enough just to keep the airflow as well. Like, I don't, for example, use fans in my cabinets anymore. I just open and close the doors regularly enough for it to mean that there isn't mould build up in there, because the airflow is good enough. So yeah, open doors and windows. Be aware as well of the plants that it's affecting and whether or not they're plants that are just like stuck in a corner, because maybe they're in an area of your room that isn't receiving good airflow, and maybe you need to kind of like target a fan or something like that better in that area. Sometimes as well, for certain types of plant, increasing the light can help. Obviously, this does come down to the individual plant and its lighting requirements. But I have found that when I've been living in higher light spaces, often I don't get mould as much. And typically, to be honest, mould isn't something nowadays that I really deal with at all. Like, I had a moss pole that went mouldy about 6 months ago, and that was on my monstera that's just in the corner here. But again, it was in a corner, it wasn't getting good airflow. So yeah, that is what I would suggest. Okay, perfect. I am going to wash my hands, give the table a little clean off, and then we can pot them up and get some new plants going. Okay, so I have washed out this bowl so I can mix something up in here. And in fact, I'm going to need to do a quick Google, because I believe this is an epiphytic jungle cacti. And if that's the case, I probably, with what I've got, would go in with something like an anthurium soil mix with lots of grit and like sand and stuff like that. But I'm just gonna double check that. Just had a look on Reddit, which is, oh my goodness, I've just discovered Reddit and it is so good for planty questions. And lots of people seem to be growing it in a similar mix and having success doing it that way. So that is what I'm gonna do. Ooh, the bag has split, that's why it's going everywhere. I was gonna say because it is an epiphytic cactus, typically they don't need quite as much sand and grit as like a desert cactus, for example. And I just don't know how much of this I'm going to need. I'm just going to do little bits and mix as I go, I think. And I know I do get questions from you guys sometimes about like how, like, do I measure my mix? What ratios do I use? And I used to be so ridiculously strict with this. I used to have little measuring cups and I'd use them all for my soils. And nowadays I just do it by eye. I do it by eye and just like how it feels. And yeah, that seems to work perfectly well for me. This is also a cactus that likes to remain not evenly moist, but it doesn't like to dry out as much as some of my others. So again, something that isn't like ridiculously well draining and does retain a little bit of moisture is going to be best. So yeah, I think just looking at that, to me, that looks like a nice mix for this plant. But as I say, I have got a lot of it here. Do I divide it or do I just pot size up? To be honest, it would be less to maintain if I pot size up. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I will do that. Oh, I wasn't planning on doing that. I was planning on dividing. It's hard to gauge because the root system, it's all like completely broken up. But I think I'm going to go in with this, and I'm actually going to do what I did earlier and put some lacquer at the bottom just so that it doesn't all spill out as soon as I start working with it. And the next question was, if you had to start your plant collection again from scratch, which plants would you get first? Oh, what a good question. I don't think I've ever had that question before. Which plants would I get first? Well, right now, like the Anthurium pallitiflorum is making me so happy. So currently, how I'm feeling at the moment, I would say I would probably get that one first. Just because it's bringing me so much joy and I've wanted it for such a long time. Yeah, I think I would, if I didn't have it, rush out and get it again. I think the Alocasia the Alocasia mitchellitziana, this is the variegated Frydek. Don't get me wrong, I love my variegated Frydek, but I think just as a staple plant in my collection, the standard Alocasia mitchellitziana, I would definitely get that again. Oh, how many was I allowed to pick? Which plants? Okay, let's give me 5. And also, if you guys know the answer to this, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to know what yours are, what your like staples in your collection would be. So what have I said? I've said the pallitiflorum, the mitchellitziana. I think probably the bird of paradise. I know I spoke about that one at the beginning of this video, and I said that it was a really ridiculously easy plant. It's one of my easiest. I just think it's the most wonderful plant. I honestly adore it, and it's very low maintenance, but it gives me beautiful growth, and it really just helps to like give this room a jungly vibe. I think because it towers above all my other plants, I think it's just stunning. So yeah, that's 3. I would say my Hoya latifolia Sarawak. However, it's just being a bit of a pain in the backside at the moment, and I can't work out how to get it to do what I want it to do, so I'm not going to say that one. I want to say my Alocasia portadora. However, again, it's being a drama plant. Just a classic Monstera deliciosa. I feel like I couldn't have a complete collection without one. Oh, it's a toss up between two, so I'm going to give you two more. I was going to say my fern leaf cactus. Again, I know that is a fairly new addition to my collection, but it's one that I love. But then also just like a Scindapsus. I don't know which Scindapsus, maybe an Argyraeus, a Scindapsus argyraeus, just because I think Scindapsus is such a beautiful, underrated genus of plants, and I love it, and yeah, I don't talk about it enough. So that is probably what I would say. But as I say, yeah, let me know what you would choose. How do you keep your moss poles hydrated without watering them all day long? So the first thing I would recommend doing is using a plastic backed moss pole. You don't have to, like I have got some in my collection that are not plastic backed, but more and more so I am changing out all of my moss poles to be like D-shaped plastic back moss poles, just because they help to retain the water a lot better. If you're not using a plastic backed one, then it just evaporates much faster and means that they are much higher maintenance. And then what I do is I use a little, like a plastic cup or a container of some sort that you can pierce a little hole in, and I would just balance it on top of my moss poles, and I'll use it as essentially like a slow release watering system, and I'll just fill that up. I usually fill them up most days, but to be honest, if I go away on holiday, for example, what I'll usually do is I'll make sure that the moss pole's really well hydrated before I go, and then I'll just wrap my moss pole in cling film, and that just helps to retain moisture. And to be honest, if you don't care how things look, you could do the cling film thing like full time. You absolutely could do that, and you would probably really not have to water them very often at all. I just know that that wouldn't look as nice. But if you're not bothered about that, then that's probably what I would recommend. But yeah, I just hang on to little like plastic drinking containers, plastic cups, that's the word I'm looking for. In fact, I use plastic cups for everything. As you can see, I've got a half plastic cup on top here. I've got the lid of a drinks container just here on top of that one. I literally use them for everything. So yeah, I just make a little hole in the top of that and use it as I have already said, a slow release watering system. Also, I'm spreading this out in this pot here, and it actually already is starting to feel like a really big full plant. I mean, I know it was really squeezed into the small pot I had it in before, but I'm even wondering, doing it this way, should I be am I going to need to put it in another pot again? I feel like even this might be too small. How often do you do plant care on a normal week? It really depends, to be honest. It depends. Ideally, I like to do a little bit of plant care every day, even if it is just the smallest amount when I get up, check my cabinet, do a little bit of watering in there. I typically wake up very early in the morning as well. I am usually up and about by 6 o'clock in the morning, so I do quite a lot of plant care at that time. There are some weeks where I don't do any at all. There are some weeks if I've got a really busy week and I know that everything's, or even if I don't know that everything's on top of watering wise, I will just kind of go, right, okay, I'm going to have to leave it for this week, or life just takes over sometimes, doesn't it? But I think on a typical week, I don't know, maybe 6 hours of plant care a week. This is bearing in mind as well that I obviously make videos about planty stuff, so I'm actively doing more plant stuff. There's some things that I do that I could put off, and I'm like, no, I'll get them done now. So yeah, but I would say probably around 6 hours as an average, I reckon, ish. And yeah, I've got, I don't know exactly actually how many plants I've got now. I have got rid of quite a few in the last year, but then I've also acquired some. But I reckon I've probably got about 300, around the 300-ish, give or take a few. And yeah, considering that they all obviously require watering and pruning and trellising and moss poling, and they all need different things, I think about 6 hours, if that's accurate. between 5 minutes and a couple of hours each day, I would say. But yeah, okay, I was trying to be very neat about doing this when I first started doing it and not get like soil on the foliage. However, I've given up on that just because there's so many little nooks and crannies here that I need to fill in order to make sure that it's all covered. I've got a question here. I've just actually skipped a few because I'm almost done on this, but someone said, do you think you'll ever fall out of love with plant care? And the answer is no, I don't think I will. I don't think I will. As I say, I've spoken about burnout a lot, and burnout is a very real thing for me. Sometimes when I'm in the middle of burnout, I can feel like maybe I won't fall back in love with it, because I do temporarily fall out of love with it, if that makes sense. But then again, I always come back to it, whether it takes me a few days, a couple of weeks, sorry. I don't think, in fact, I know I haven't fallen out of love with it for months on end. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, but it hasn't happened for me. It hasn't happened for me. So no, I don't see myself ever falling out of love with it. Just because every time I come back to it, even if it's been a burnout period and even if it's been a struggle, I come back to it and I feel like I fall in love all over again. I'm like, oh my God, the joy of plant care. It makes me feel so good about myself. It makes me feel so nourished. Like it makes my soul feel nourished. But it really does. Like plant therapy for me is huge. It's absolutely huge. And I can't imagine my life without it. So no, currently I don't see that happening. Right, this is what the plant looks like now, and this is definitely much more suited to this pot size, 100%. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna give it a water through after I finish filming this. Oh, I missed a teeny tiny bit there. Yeah, I'm going to give it a good water through, and because again I will do some digging because I feel like I don't know this plant well enough yet, but from what I know, it's a jungle cactus, and for that reason it can cope in slightly higher levels of humidity. And what I think I will then do is what I always do. I'll use a plastic sandwich bag, and I might need to actually cut the seal off depending on how big the pot is. But what I'll probably do is just create a little isolation zone. Yeah, I need to cut this bit off. But I'll chop off that bit, and then I will stretch the sandwich bag so it's going all the way over the plant. And then I'll be able to just essentially keep this plant from coming into contact with any of my other plants. I'll be able to look through the transparent bag and monitor it. And if there are any other pest issues in the next few weeks, then I can deal with them accordingly. But I really hope that I've done a good enough job today that I won't have to do it again. You never know, but I will keep you updated with it, and I'll let you know. And hopefully when it gets going again now, it will grow beautifully for me, because as I say, it's got so much more space, and I think it will be much happier. But yeah. Oh, but thank you for doing plant chores with me today. I feel like I've kind of needed it. As I say, I've been very brain foggy and not quite on the ball, and this has just been very relaxing, and it's definitely been what my body's needed. So yeah, I hope if you were doing stuff along with me, you got lots done. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.
Stay sexy, plant lovers.